Welcome into an all-new episode of Her Playbook, brought to you by Nike. My name is Madelyn Burke, and this week I'm thrilled to be joined by the DraftKings Chief Marketing Officer. She was one of the first 15 employees of the company since joining in 2015 and has worked her way up and become a powerhouse in the industry. Please welcome Stephanie Sherman. Stephanie, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Yes, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's such an interesting journey to be a part of a company like DraftKings that has grown so much in your time there and has become kind of a part of the zeitgeist and the sports world in such a huge way. I'm so curious what that must have been like going from the start to where you are now.
Yes, it absolutely has been a journey, but an exciting one nonetheless. And I think, you said it exactly where when I started, marketing team was 3-4 folks. Now fast forward to today, over 200 and, going from one product, daily fantasy, now to multiple products, across sports and, so it's been really exciting. I think, certainly punctuated by highlights and lowlights, but some of the core, principles that we have, some of the core, pillars of how we think about our product and our business have really remained consistent over the journey. So every day is a new surprise. Can say that I've been here now 10 years, and certainly can say every day is an exciting new challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also, I mean, going through the evolution of the way that DraftKings has been, brought into the cultural world, like you mentioned, daily fantasy, but also now at the point where there's partnerships with leagues and teams. Whereas, at the infancy of this, there was some kind of tension around, is gambling and sport, how much can those two be intertwined? From your perspective, in a marketing way, how much has that changed?
Yeah, so it certainly has changed. I mean, I think back in the early daily fantasy days, I remember some of our first partnerships were really foundational as we think about, the trust that we had to think about fans and fan engagement. So starting even from our first league partnership with MLB, through to today. And certainly, the Giants partnership is one where really when we first launched, sports betting was one of our first partnerships. So it's been really incredible working with teams and leagues, again, sort of steeped in tradition, but also really forward-thinking around how can we engage, how can we create a better fan experience and entertainment.
And did you grow up a sports fan? What was your sport growing up, or how did that translate into pursuing a career in sports betting?
Yes. So Boston born and raised. So certainly, some Boston fandom, Red Sox, certainly the, 2004 era, strong wins there, the Drew Bledsoe Patriots era. But personally, for me, in terms of playing sports, I was track and field was my sport. My growing up, my father was an Olympic boxer, so always sort of the Olympics and some of the events around that were always really inspiring. But coming out of that, I think a lot of the core pillars there. So you think about, some of the things that attracted me to working at DraftKings, certainly it was that business opportunity. I mean, I think when you think about the opportunity that we have along with others is really to redefine the sporting experience and make it, continuously more engaging. And I think that, that opportunity to help redefine how fans can engage in an experience with sport was incredibly exciting and appealing to me. And, also at the time where I joined, on a more personal level, it was the notion of, marketing. One of the things I love about marketing is it's such a huge umbrella. What marketing is, can come in a lot of different forms, but the ability to really have a hand about that end-to-end sort of consumer touch point journey from, what is the message, who is the audience, what's that distribution, and be able to bring that to life was really compelling and exciting for me.
Yeah. And I mean, I can imagine too, there's so many things that growing up as an athlete, playing sports, running track and field, that you can translate to the corporate world, to being a CMO? What are some of the lessons that you learned or that you kind of still hold on to from being a part of a team or a part of a group chasing after a goal in the world of sport that you bring to the corporate world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, certainly uh, that sort of grit, that sort of firsthand overcoming, all the different obstacles that come your way. Certainly, a lot of parallels to um, the sporting world. And I think some of the biggest things that I've learned, certainly is that perseverance. Certainly is that sort of overcoming the challenges. And I think being creative and solution oriented have really been some of the bedrocks of how I've thought about my role here at DraftKings. And certainly, I think the team is really strong. And I think, one of the other pieces that sort of parallel to the sports world is, big learning is people are your best assets. And I think that, how a team can come together to drive to either an outcome or, a business result, I think is very similar, where it's making sure that, everyone's rowing in the same direction, same objective, and being sort of critically clear on what that is. Again, being able to figure out how to navigate sort of through ambiguity, through change, how to be at the forefront of innovation, and in our case, in a very exciting opportunity.
Sure, sure. And the more opportunity for people to do this and get their hands on your product, the better. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is, being a woman in this world that is a really male dominant. I mean, I work with the Giants, I work in sports, and a lot of people ask me like, oh, what's it like being a woman? It seems kind of like a question we hear a lot, but it is something that's valid, right? And, working in sports betting, working at the top level of a company that is as big as DraftKings, what do you experience and how has that experience evolved for you over the years?
Yes, I think, certainly as you mentioned, I think we have a long way to go, good progress as it relates to the women and representation in sports. I think for me in particular, I've been very fortunate to have very strong male allies. One of the things that I think is critical, for all women and not even gender, but is to have that sort of strong sponsorship and mentorship, particularly as women, grow in their careers. I think it's just critical to make sure that, having a support system for other women, sharing experience, sharing learnings, is, I think, critical to raise everyone up.
Yeah. And I mean, when you are working through this, you mentioned having these advocates and these allies and these mentors along the way. Who are some of the most impactful mentors that you've had, and what are some of the pieces of advice that they've given you?
Yes. So, would probably start with my parents. From my father immigrated here from Greece, and parents had a small business, and ultimately, I think seeing, as I mentioned, seeing the sort of all-consuming entrepreneurial nature, the ups and downs, the hard work. Ultimately, I think that was where the early seeds of people are your best assets that I mentioned started to form, and I think seeing that firsthand was one of the earlier big lessons from from a more corporate experience that I would say are, one of the things that our former chief marketing officer, a huge advocate and strong mentor of mine. And I think, the, continuing down the path of, always making sure that, solution oriented, always making sure that you're continuing to have the strongest team, uh, and that you have the support system around you for the team to be successful.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, one of the things that we love to do too is with this podcast is give, some inspirational tactics and some playbooks to not just young girls, but also young boys, young women and men about how to achieve the highest goals that they have, whether it be in and around the world of sports or business. And being a chief marketing officer of a company like DraftKings is a huge accomplishment. And, whether it is looking back at your younger self or looking at this next generation coming into the workforce and coming into this arena and saying, oh, wow, how do I get a job like that? How do I become a powerhouse like Stephanie? What's the key that you would say you wish you knew then or you did know then, which helped you?
Yes, it's a great question. I think there's a couple of things I'd say, certainly to my younger self, but I think the ones that pop to mind are really keep an open mind to what the path and journey that you're going on. And oftentimes, maybe it's a lateral move or a new opportunity that is not something that might have been in a plan or an expectation, but really keeping an open mind to learning and taking some, left turns to gain experience, gain exposure to new opportunities.
Yeah. And, just it's always nice to hear that your name is brought up in rooms you're not in, right? And having those advocates and those allies and keeping an open mind. That one I really like too, because sometimes we think, oh, this is where I want to go with my career. And then something surprises us and we end up over here or over there. When you started out, what was your aim and what surprised you that brought you this way?
Yeah, so for me, started out more in a sales oriented focus. Again, marketing sort of being a wide umbrella, as I mentioned. And I think for me, what I really ended up loving about one of the paths that I was in was the connectivity of data and messaging and marketing. And I think from there, it really took me on how can I bring all of these things together? And ultimately sort of the turn of going to, what was a small startup at the time of DraftKings, I think was not, one that I had anticipated, was doing really well at the former company I had been at, but ultimately thought this might be a great opportunity, business model, really strong, the vision and the co-founders, themselves as, beyond sort of the vision, just really great people that you want to work with and spend time with. So I think, the startup path was not necessarily, in the plan, so to speak, but certainly has been an exciting journey.
Right. And it's definitely grown far from those startup roots. But when you look at what your job entails now and the day-to-day, what is your favorite part about what you do?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot of favorites. But I would certainly say that, one of the big parts is when, we've been able to have events or opportunities where it's meeting some of our players, and sort of seeing live, the passion that they have for the product and the brand, and seeing that come to life, is, really one of my favorite parts. I think, recently, at the Super Bowl this year, just looking around and seeing, down a few, down a few seats, the DraftKings app, folks being, able to bet on, that has just been, incredibly exciting. I think beyond that, one of the things that I love, certainly the people, the day-to-day challenges, but the notion that everything is changing and evolving. So what is true today may not be true tomorrow. And how do we continue to think about driving innovation? How do we continue to think about, as a market leader, how do we continue to head, certainly around as we think about responsible gaming, as we think about new products, and really looking forward as a leader in the space. That's certainly my favorite part of the job.
Well, and looking forward, what in your opinion and in your dream scenario, what is next for DraftKings?
A lot of great things coming for DraftKings. I think ultimately continuing to redefine and enhance the experience that sports fans have. So however, that vision continues to come to life, we'll be right there as it, ensuring we have seamless customer, frictionless experiences on the product. The exciting offers and promotions that, we're hearing that our players and our customers want. And looking forward to, other ways in which we can deliver on enhancing that fan experience, on enhancing that sort of entertainment. That is where we will be.
Love it. Stephanie Sherman, thanks so much for taking the time today and for sharing your story and your playbook on how you got here. Wishing you so much continued success in this journey.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Stephanie Sherman, Chief Marketing Officer from DraftKings, joining her playbook, brought to you by Nike. That's been a wrap for our conversation today. I'm Madelyn Burke. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.